Welcome to Like Mother, Like Murder. I am Rachel.
And I'm Heather.
We bring you the good,
the badass,
and the crime.
This is Like Mother, Like Murder.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Like Mother, Like Murder, your favorite true crime momcast. I am Rachel.
And I am Heather. And we bring you mom-related crime content weekly. From missing moms to murdered moms, moms who murder, survivors, and more.
To everyone who is returning, welcome back. Always happy to have you guys here. And those who are new here, we've got an influx of numbers. So all of you new people, so nice to meet you. Thank you for checking us out.
Thank you for checking us out. We hope you stay and bring along some of your friends. I just had a flashback, and maybe it's because I'm wearing this shirt, but I was about to say, like, come join the wine bucket.
You guys, we used to be Wine Time when we started. For anyone who does not know that, we were Wine Time. We actually, our recording platform used to be Wine Time, and people would log in and be like, am I in the right space? I'm like, yes, it's us, I promise. How are you this week? How's it going?
You know, a little bit better. I'm hoping that February will really just start to pick up. We had a fun weekend. It was like birthday parties back to back, but it was totally fun. Kids had a blast. And I made it to the gym for the first time in like 2-3 weeks. And I feel like that's really boosted my
I was going to say,
psyche.
maybe that's why you feel like things are better anyways. Like, I mean, I hope that they actually are. I don't mean it in that sense.
It's a perception
The gym, yes, the gym just like makes you feel so much better other than the physical feeling of feeling so much worse.
Yeah. So true. It's like the more I go to the gym, actually, the less like my body likes me, because it's like crack, snap, pop, stop hurting me. But my brain is like, endorphins, girl, get your thing.
Yes. That's the best. I love that. I also did go to my home personal gym today, this morning. Actually, I brought the bike upstairs and I cycled upstairs because snow days, more snow days, you guys. Like, are you sick of hearing me say that? Because there's more of them. We had another winter storm last night, got another 5, 6, 7 inches. And I'm just a happy person.
I just don't know how you're dealing with that. I can't even imagine.
I'm not dealing with it, but I cycled and I feel a lot better. So that's what I'm saying. Like, you guys move your bodies.
Move your bodies. It's good for the mind, and you know, if you're not broken and old like we are, then it's good for the body too. So I wanted to do a really quick shout out before we get into today's episode.
Yes.
And for those of you who are like, oh my God, just get to the case. This is actually very important, because we are going to be talking about an amazing project that we had the opportunity to be a part of. And it is called Or No. And it is brought to you by Fire's Eyes Media, which we also collabed with them back in November of last year when we did another collaborative kind of podcast. This one, though, is coming out on Valentine's Day. So by the time this episode, you guys are hearing this in your ear holes, it will be out and you need to go listen. So it's Or No. It's a You Should Be Here series, and it's all about domestic violence, true crime cases.
Yeah, so Fire Eyes Media, it's Jen Rivera and Jules Thorpe, and they put these together. The first one that came out in November was all about those who would not be home for the holidays. That was the homicide tree. I know that you guys heard us announce and shout that out as much as we can, and we partnered with them again. They asked us to be a part of this one, which absolutely 100%. Anytime that we can share more and more, that's what we want to do. And this one was about domestic violence, domestic abuse, and we bring two very, very important cases, and we've covered them as well. But it's just different, and you guys got to go check them out. There's a lot of podcasters who join this. I think there's 16 episodes going to be in this series. Awesome. So shout out to all of those podcasters too, which they'll get there. We'll announce them when it comes out, and shout everything out more. But definitely go check that out. So thankful that we're able to work with them and just work alongside all of these amazing podcasters for a good cause, because all of the money, all of the profit from this project goes back to a nonprofit that helps, that is hands-on helping people who have gone through these horrible things, whether it's a survivor and that, whether it's a victim of the abuse, or the families needing support as well. So it's a beautiful thing to be able to work alongside them.
For sure.
I'm glad you shouted them out today.
For sure. I think it's, we love our opportunities to, collab with our fellow podcasters, and especially we love Jules and Jen, and all the other amazing talent that, donated their time to this. But we also like to do it for a cause. So we're all about it. So go check 100%. That out. It should be out now. It came out the 14th, and you guys should be hearing this the week after. So go binge it all.
Yep, do that. All right, Heather, you got a case for me today?
I do, and I have a really good one, and I think you're going to be super proud of me because I'm actually going to start with a quote. I'm pulling a Rachel.
I'm already proud of you. What?
And this is actually a quote from the subject of today's case. So this is from an interview that she had with Miss Magazine. Okay, you ready? Quote.
I'm ready for it. Okay.
Here we go. There were two strains. That life was largely made of showing up every day and being engaged in the life I was living. With my family, my son, my partner, and with gardening, hunting, and being with my neighbors. That was a very strong strain, just being in that life in an everyday way. Then there was always that fear that the knock at the door would come. I tried to be as careful as I could, managing my exposure and risk so that wouldn't happen. But it was always just there as a nervous background noise. End quote.
What?
Are you ready? Do you know where this is going?
No, I've got so many thoughts going on right now. I'm already like, okay, go.
Okay, so let's backtrack a bit. It's 1979, and Alice Louise Metzinger has just given birth to her first child, a son named Jamie. Jamie's father wasn't really in the picture, but that was okay because Alice could provide for the both of them. Eventually, when Jamie was about 6 or 7, they moved to the city of Lebanon in Oregon. She got a boyfriend named Ron Duncan, who she would eventually marry, and the three of them settled into a nice life. Alice, she taught cooking classes at the community college and worked at restaurants. She even became part owner of a restaurant and bakery in Eugene, Oregon. She was a mom who made cookies for her son's sports team, and she liked to jog along the Willamette River. As is the case with many of our episodes, everything seemed to be moving along as normal, but as Alice herself put it, just under the surface, there was always that tumultuous, just undercurrent, the feeling of needing to look over her shoulder. So, for example, Alice had told Jamie at a very young age not to ask about his extended family. While other children did projects about family trees or even spent weekends at Grandma and Grandpa's house, not Jamie. When people would ask, doesn't he ever wonder about it? His mom would reply, no. He knows we don't talk about that. Her partner at the restaurant in Eugene said she knew Alice was hiding something, but she didn't know what. She came to the conclusion that there must have been something in her past because she never had contact with her family. So part of looking over her shoulder most likely included keeping up to date with any news related to a bank robbery from 1970 that had resulted in the murder of a policeman, Officer Walter Schroeder. He was a father of 9 children and was shot in the back after arriving to the scene of the crime. So this bank robbery turned murder included 5 suspects. 3 of them were captured pretty quickly after the robbery and murder, but 2 of the 5, the only women in the group, had managed to escape, and they remained on the lam. Susan Edith Sachs and Katherine Ann Power. These were the 2 women that escaped, and they were even put on the FBI's most wanted list a few months after the crime. But despite having their faces nationally distributed on FBI posters, the pair continued to elude authorities for years.
That's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Do you know
where
I'm
are
going?
you?
Okay. So that is until 1975, when the case of the 1970 robbery and murder would close another chapter with the capture of Susan Edith Sachs. So Sachs was recognized by a police officer who had seen her photo after the FBI had distributed it. But there was one last person unaccounted for, Katherine Ann Power. So finding Katherine was especially difficult, and eventually even the FBI dropped her from the most wanted list in 1984 after years of little to no leads. So what did all this have to do with Alice Louise Metzinger? Well, in 1993, Alice began admitting first to her therapist, then to her family, and to her friends that she was actually Katherine Ann Power.
Oh, man. Yeah, she is.
And, yeah, she is. And for the past 23 years, she had been living a lie. That pervasive undercurrent of fear and unease was the fact that for over 2 decades, she was hiding. Her self-proclaimed naive and misguided decisions from the past, which included radicalism, robbery, and ultimately running from her crimes.
Yeah, I was originally thinking it was going to be Thelma and Louise. Like, that's what I thought it was going to be.
That would also be very, very cool. But you're not far off. You're not far off.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah.
Dang, people, you just never know.
You never know.
You never know who you're like around.
Seriously.
Even if you're around them for 20, did you say 23 or 26?
23 years, this woman.
23 years.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and the crazy part, right, is like she has a whole ass son who grew up, first of all, not knowing his extended family because she couldn't tell him, obviously.
Of course not.
And then also, like, with his mom hiding this massive secret.
Wow. Yeah. So why now?
Okay, I'm so glad you asked that. Let's keep going. But before we get into that, you know what I like to do. Let's go all the way back to the beginning.
I do know that.
All the way back to the beginning. So, Katherine Ann Power, later known as Alice Louise Metzinger. She was born in Denver, Colorado on January 25th, 1949. She was the third of 7 children of her parents, Winfield, which I find just like the coolest name ever, Winfield. He was a bank credit manager, and then her mom, Marjorie, was
a bank credit manager. Is she a bank robber or what?
I never even put those 2 together. That's hilarious.
What does she have against her father that she needed to go do crazy shit?
I think you'll see that there's some daddy issues probably here going on. Okay. Her dad was a bank credit manager. I never even made that connection. That's gold. Okay. And then her mom, Marjorie, was a registered nurse. So
she should have followed her.
Yeah.
Sorry, she should have followed her mom's
that route.
Goodness.
So the Power family, they were your typical middle-class Irish Catholic family. Catherine was a Girl Scout. She eventually earned a scholarship to a local private Catholic all-girls high school. She even won, get this, a Betty Crocker Cooking Award, which I was like, hey, maybe that's why she baked cookies later. And then she actually graduated valedictorian from her high school. And then she received a full ride scholarship to Brandeis University. I had to double check with Zach, like how you say that, but I actually don't remember if I'm saying it right. So sorry. Brandeis. Brandeis. Yeah. It's in Massachusetts. So she went all the way from Denver, Colorado, all the way across the country to Massachusetts. And she started there in 1967. So Catherine remembers that she came from this, middle class, working class, large family, and the scholarship to Brandeis was the key to getting out. So the late 60s, though, and early 70s, this was not a very typical time to be a college student in America. The U.S. was involved in the Vietnam War, and they had started the draft, right? So America's involvement and the draft, they were very controversial. And Rachel just repped her Army shirt.
Yeah, for YouTubers. Just pulled up my Army shirt.
Go check us out on YouTube. See our faces.
I'm not getting drafted, though.
No. But it was the draft was a very controversial thing, as was just America's involvement in the Vietnam War in general. Protests were happening all across the country, including a lot at college campuses such as Brandeis, whatever. So Catherine, she was actually like a pretty active participant in these protests. She describes attending her first anti-war demonstration just a month after she got to college. So she got there, she jumped right in. In fact, Catherine and her roommate, Susan Edith Sachs, were organizers for a lot of the student protests. They were kind of leaders in this on-campus group. And as you will come to see, Catherine and Susan's involvement, it didn't stop with the peaceful protests or the sit-ins or the marching to oppose the war. Catherine explained that she had outwardly communicated her desire to be more active and more militant.
Okay. I was going to say it usually doesn't stop there, right?
Yeah, it's definitely one of those things that you can see like progressing. So she was eventually recruited to a guerrilla-style revolutionary group by a man named Stanley Bond. Now, Bond is a cool last name.
Okay.
But
it's
what
not
kind
Thelma and Louise. No. It's James Bond's story. I'm understanding now. I'm following.
We're going to see how many we can get up in here.
How many movies are we talking about right now?
Well, because the other thing I think about, Bond, obviously a badass name, but you think about a protester named Stanley, like he's the leader of this guerrilla revolutionary group named Stanley.
Every time I hear Stanley, I think of The Office, so I don't think.
I was thinking of Flat Stanley, did you ever read those when you were a kid, Flat Stanley?
No.
Okay. So, no.
Well, because it's like, I didn't read as a kid, I didn't read as an adult.
Oh, God. Or maybe you did, you just don't remember,
No, I did read a lot growing up.
I remember you used to read a lot.
Yeah, I used to read a lot, and I, after high school, stopped and just forgot how. So, I don't read anymore.
Well, maybe you should start reading some Flat Stanley.
No.
Okay. So Stanley Bond was actually a Vietnam veteran himself, and he was actually currently out on parole. And he was also enrolled at Brandeis as part of a government program for ex-convicts. So in addition to Katherine Power, Stanley Bond also recruited two other parolees to the group, William Gilday and Robert Valeri. So these three convicts, Stanley Bond, William Gilday, and Robert Valeri, they all had a history of crimes that included breaking and entering, theft, robbery. So they had it covered in terms of the, like, let's steal some shit crimes.
Activity.
Yeah. So ultimately, they also recruited Catherine's roommate, Susan Edith Sachs. And what they decided to do was they were going to steal money to help fund the anti-war movement. So first, the group decided they were going to rob a National Guard armory for the weapons, and then they would go rob a bank for the money. So this all goes down in 1970 when Katherine was only 21 years old. Can you imagine,
what
like,
were you
at
doing
21?
at 21?
Like, yeah.
I mean, we all live different lives, but I was nowhere near that.
True. We all live different lives.
My dad didn't work for a bank, so I didn't have those thoughts.
Yeah, I wonder if, like, her dad working for the bank gave her any insider knowledge on how it all worked. So on September 20th, 1970, the group set out to rob a National Guard armory in Newburyport, Massachusetts. And what they did was they stole the weapons, they stole the ammunition, and then they set fire to the place. Now, at the beginning,
that's crazy. Like, how are you not stopped already? Like,
it's pretty insane, like, how they were able to, yeah, it's pretty insane. Because you would think, especially at this time, with there being so much upheaval, a place like a National Guard armory would have, like, some pretty serious, like, security.
right.
But apparently 5, you know, I mean, I guess they did have 3 guys with, like, pretty decent history of robbing shit. So I don't know. Maybe that helped. So Katherine, at the beginning, she was all in, right? She wanted to be more active. She wanted to be more militant. But when push came to shove, the cracks started to show. While her partners in crime were setting fire to the armory, allegedly, supposedly, Katherine, she was supposed to be keeping lookout, but instead she was just throwing up in the bushes.
Oh my gosh.
Like, she was not.
She's 21.
Yeah. This, I think the reality of the situation hit her. Yeah. Are you saying she was 21 so she was throwing up because she was hungover? No, I think.
Yeah.
I think it was the nerves. I think the reality of the situation was getting to her.
I'm following.
God. Okay, so just 3 days later, on September 23rd, 1970, the group turned their attention to the State Street Bank in Boston. So that day, Katherine was actually waiting in a switch car a mile away from the bank, apparently being given the responsibility of a driver at the switch car because she wouldn't be dependable enough to be part of the crew inside the bank, as shown by the throw up previously.
Yeah, right.
So while she waited, her roommate, Susan Edith Sachs, and the recruiter turned romantic partner with Katherine. Okay. So they did kind of buddy, kissy up, Stanley Bond. And then one of the other ex-convicts recruited by Bond, Robert Valeri, they walked into the bank, immediately firing shots into the walls and yelling, "We mean business." So the 5th member of the crew, William Gilday, he was actually sitting just outside the bank in another car. So in total, they have 3 cars. They have the switch car that Katherine's in. They have this car that the 3 bank robbers show up in. And then they have, like, a 3rd car that I think he's supposed to kind of be like a lookout car.
Okay.
So they go in the bank, fire shots. "We mean business." And after taking $27,000, I wish I knew what the exchange rate would be for today. Guess we should ask Scott and Ryan.
I would just instantly, so $27,000, it's
2.9
million.
Perfect.
Just
Love
kidding.
it. The trio exited the bank and they drove off in their car. However, Gilday, who was in the other car, he stayed behind. And when Officer Walter Schroeder comes to the scene, he had responded to the call. He was like one of the first ones on the scene. It was him and one other guy. He was behind his patrol car waiting because I think he thought he didn't know if they had left yet. And then I've read different reports. I've read that one, he was still just standing waiting behind his patrol car. Another one I read said that he was actually starting to rush into the bank to, help. Either way, Gilday, who was sitting in the other car, fired a machine gun and then drove off.
Oh.
So Officer Schroeder was struck. And like I said, he was a father of 9.
Oh, my God.
9 kids. Wow. And he did eventually succumb to his injuries hours later, and he died.
Gosh.
The group would later hear on the radio that an officer had been shot. And when they all eventually met up later, they asked Gilday, they were like, why the hell did you shoot that guy? That wasn't the plan. And
right.
They had plans to rob, but I think ultimately they didn't want to kill anyone. But Gilday was a bit of a wild card, because apparently when they asked him, like, what the fuck, he replied, quote, he had always wanted to shoot a police officer, end quote.
Oh.
Complete trash.
Trash. Yeah. Okay.
So Katherine would actually later say, too, that killing someone was never part of the plan. But she admits to being naive. She obviously overlooked that, like, that could easily happen when you roll into a bank robbery and you have guns. So in a later conversation with someone from the FBI, Katherine recalls that this FBI lady told her, quote, you should have known better. You should have known that if you were going to run around with people with guns, that somebody is going to get killed, end quote.
Makes sense to me.
Right? So after finding out that Officer Schroeder had indeed died, the group quickly scattered. But it did not take long for the 3 men to be apprehended. So first, Robert Valeri, which is the guy who he was inside the bank, he was identified by cameras and was quickly arrested, like, outside his house, like, days later.
Yeah.
Like, just
knock, knock.
Him. Yeah.
Who's here?
Hello.
We saw you.
Yeah. So, and then in no time, Valeri turned. He flipped, and he identified the other members of the group.
Okay.
So, William Gilday, the shooter, he actually led police on a crazy manhunt all the way to New Hampshire. So, remember, this happened in Boston. I mean, I guess it's probably only an hour or two, but, like, he went from Boston all the way over to New Hampshire. And when he was trying to run away, so this guy is just like scum. When he was trying to run away, he actually carjacked and then kidnapped an old lady. He did later release her on the side of the road. She was supposedly unharmed. But what the hell, man?
She's just like, no.
Yeah.
Like, I'm just trying to get home and make supper. What are you doing?
I know. Poor lady. And then he was eventually found a few days later, and he was caught by police. One thing that I read that completely broke my heart was apparently when he was, like, on the run, they had his daughter, I think they had her do it over the radio, or somehow got a message that just said, Dad, just turn yourself in. Like, don't do this.
Oh, my gosh.
Oh.
I'm sorry. I don't know how I feel about that.
Yeah. I mean, it's so hard, right? And I'm not sure how old the daughter was. Like, if I was an adult,
that would play a factor.
Like, I think, like, that's one thing, but it's, I don't know.
Yeah. You're right. Depending on the age, I can see it.
Right.
I don't know why
like,
instantly
if they were, like, taking
of
advantage of some, like, 8 or 9-year-old, like, that'd be insane. Yeah. I don't know exactly how old she was, but that was one thing I read, which just broke my heart. So, we talked
I hope it broke his.
Well, so. Yeah, jerk. So, we talked about Valeri. He got caught outside his house, flipped on his guys. We talked about Gilday, who was the shooter. He went on a manhunt, eventually got caught after carjacking and kidnapping a sweet old lady. And then there's Stanley Bond, right? The recruiter of the group. So he had somehow made his way all the way to Seattle. Oh my God. And on a flight from Seattle to Grand Junction, Colorado, I mean, this guy was just like plane. So on a flight from Seattle to Grand Junction, Colorado, a woman actually recognized him and called in a tip to the FBI. And before he was able to fly off again, so literally on the runway, I think he was going from like Grand Junction, Colorado to some other place. On the runway, he's on the plane. They call the plane back in and say they have to get repairs. And when Bond deplaned, he gets taken into custody.
Was he the one that was dating?
Yes.
I'm not good with all the names.
Yes,
So
Katherine.
they didn't take off together?
No, they didn't.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Actually, Katherine and Susan took off together. So I'll get into that.
Okay.
So, eventually what would happen, now the 3 men are in custody. Both Valeri and Bond would testify against the shooter, Gilday, and explain, like, kind of, they said this was the plan, this is what happened, we asked him, what the fuck are you doing, so like they basically gave their whole story. And then Valeri ended up being given a 25-year sentence. Gilday was sentenced to death as the shooter. His sentence was later reduced to just life, and he would end up dying in prison in 2011 at the age of 82. So, and then as for Bond, Stanley Bond, he actually died in custody when he was attempting to escape using a bomb, and it detonated prematurely.
What? What?
Isn't that insane?
Wow. Yeah, that's crazy.
So crazy. So, like I said, though, Katherine and Susan, the roommates and the only 2 women in the group, they escaped together and they were not caught. So, in November of 1970, like a month after the crime, both were actually added to the FBI's Most Wanted Fugitives list, a title that only a handful of women can claim. And at first, like I said, they were traveling together and they were escaping, they were hiding in a bunch of like women's communes, and they were actually being housed by some other women's groups that were sympathetic to the movement. But they did eventually split up. So eventually Susan Sachs, like I mentioned before, she was found in 1975 after she was recognized by a police officer. And she just pled guilty to manslaughter. And she served 5 years before being paroled in 1982. As for Katherine, back to the subject of the 23 years. She eluded authorities. That's right.
Stanley can't say much, but like everyone was like, okay, she is still out there living and doing her thing. That's wild.
She did something right.
No, she did something wrong.
Okay, you're right.
Sorry. Like, I know what you mean, but don't give her that.
Okay, you're right. Yes, I understand. Okay. That's not what I meant, people. What I meant is like what Rachel said. I'm just saying, like, she managed to stay low-key for 23 years. So one of the very few tips, and the last one that ever really came in, was from 1974, saying she had actually been seen in Kentucky. But as we know, she ended up all the way over in Oregon. Don't worry.
My neighbor?
She's not there anymore.
Okay.
So Katherine actually holds the record for the longest listed woman on the FBI's infamous Most Wanted list.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Which is why like, that's where I kind of came across her story as like the longest listed woman.
Yeah.
So her wanted poster, which you can find online, it actually reads that she may be armed and should be considered very dangerous. So Katherine, eventually, she took up this identity of Alice Louise Metzinger, and she did this by getting a birth certificate of an infant who had actually died like the same year she was born, so she would have been the same age. And as we know now, she had moved to Oregon, she began her low-key life, she had a son, got a boyfriend, and things would stay chill for her. Cooking, baking, restauranting, until the early 1990s. So back to the question you posed at the very beginning of the episode. How and why, after 2 decades, did Katherine, aka Alice, how did her real identity finally come to light?
You said she was talking to a therapist, right?
She
like,
was
why
talking
in the world?
to a therapist.
Why in the world would you all of a sudden be like, hey, want to know something crazy?
Basically, that's kind of what happened.
Who's this therapist? We need her.
Basically,
We need her.
It's a good-ass therapist. So it was all her. It was her herself. It wasn't the authority. She didn't feel like they were on to her, like, oh, no, my time is limited. Like, I better do something. No. So, like you remembered, she first told her real identity to her therapist. It had all started when Katherine decided to attend a workshop for her mental health. And this workshop was led by a family therapist named Linda Carroll. So Katherine had kind of depressive symptoms since she was a child. And she first attended this workshop to just manage those symptoms. She just, do your mental health. Everyone needs it, even if you are a fugitive. According to Katherine, in the first session of this workshop, Linda asked the group, so where is your soul in all of this? And apparently that's what kind of triggered Katherine to have this epiphany. And she realized that what was wrong with her was not due to her circumstances of, I don't know, being sad with her restaurant or the fact that she's a fugitive or whatever.
It's that she'd been a liar for 23 years.
It's that, exactly. It was and what she says was a soul level problem. So that was the beginning of it. And in another session, the group actually talked about their families, like they called it their origin family. So I think like, where you were born, who your parents were. And Katherine, she was used to spinning this story, like this kind of background that she had come up with, that she was separated from her family over disagreements about the Vietnam War. So her therapist replied that, look, if you can't resolve those issues with your family, you're never going to feel better. So after that session, they had a one-on-one, like she said, I have something I want to tell you. And Katherine told her the truth. She said that she was actually a fugitive. She explained the circumstances of the crime. Her therapist was like, it's been 20 years. No way they're still looking for you. And Katherine's like, no, I'm sure they would be. I mean, a police officer was killed. Like, they don't just let that go, right?
Also, how would the therapist say that?
I mean,
did she must not have given her the whole thing.
I
she must have just said I
like,
was a part of like a bank robbery, and
right.
She probably didn't add
that's
the rest
what
of it.
I'm that's my guess.
What?
Yeah. So
no, you're fine.
Yeah, you're fine. It was a bank from 20 years ago. Like, statute of limitations. No, like a police officer died. So at this point, her therapist actually suggests that she speak to a lawyer. And that's what Katherine did. So she contacted an attorney, and his name was Stephen Black. And this started the over a year-long negotiation process, which would figure out kind of the terms of Katherine's self-surrender. So during this year-long process, Katherine, she points to a few things that kind of helped her with everything that was going on. She said she started taking medications for her depression. Advocate for those medications. You do what you need to do. And she also, during this time, she received a letter from her family, who she had no contact with for the last 23 years. So the FBI had actually reached out to her family when it seemed like negotiations had kind of come to a standstill. They were kind of stuck. Mm-hmm. And Katherine's mom, who was now in her 70s and had not known whether her daughter was dead or alive. So when she was given the chance to write a letter to her daughter after over 20 years of, radio silence, she took that opportunity. And in the letter, it said, quote, "Come home, we miss you," end quote. Yeah. So
that mother's love never stops right there. That's for sure.
Very for sure. So in a statement about her surrender, Katherine said that for the sake of what she called full authenticity, she needed to answer for her actions of the past. Katherine saw it as the final step in her therapeutic process. Which I'm like, good for you for finally doing that. I'm kind of like 23 years later, like, okay, but good for you. So on September 15th, 1993. So remember, this crime took place on September 23rd, 1970. Yeah.
Okay.
So almost exactly 23 years after the crime, she pled guilty to 2 counts of armed robbery and manslaughter. And throughout the procedures, her attorneys, they would point the finger a lot at Bond, saying like, you know, they were romantic partners. He really manipulated her into the situation. She was only 21 years old. No. But you still, like, even if that was the case way back when, it's still been like over 2 decades. You're an adult, like a full-blown adult now. Katherine, she also made the following statement about Officer Schroeder's death. She said, quote, "His death was shocking to me, and I have had to examine my conscience and accept any responsibility I have for the event that led to it," end quote. So it's really, and I'll say this before I get into a little bit more, she ends up becoming like a full-on author. She's written more than 2 books. I'll talk about it. And she, I think, I don't know if she was this way before, but apparently like therapy really like did a number on her. And she just like, when you read about like all of her, like her inner monologue, basically, I'm all for therapy. I'm all for self-reflection. And I'm definitely all for like, you know, you need to do what's right. And if that means you need to admit what you did wrong, like, do it. But she's very like floofy about it. I don't know if that's the right way to put it. But what I will say is it did take 20 years or over 20 years, but the actions that she does take after this, you know, to me, it does seem sincere, and I will get into that. It just, to me, it kind of bugs me that it took 20 years.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's one of those things where like so first of all, so glad that she finally came forward. That's right. Great. But then also you think about the time and effort it took for people to try to look for her.
Yeah.
The family who said, okay, there's still people out there that have not been held accountable. I mean, we work alongside families who want justice for things. And we know that family was probably trying to get that.
Exactly.
So 23 years, that's bananas to me.
It's pretty crazy.
You know?
It's pretty crazy.
So, I mean, in the sense of her coming forward, that's great.
Right.
That's great. But still, it doesn't take away the fact that
23 years that you didn't. Yeah.
So
yeah, like she got to live a whole ass life, you know. So anyway, the part of her negotiation was that her sentence was going to be for 8 to 12 years. So at the time, her son Jamie, he was 14 years old, and as part of kind of getting her affairs in order before she would need to go to prison, she legally married her boyfriend at the time, Ron Duncan, and then Ron actually officially adopted Jamie, which I was just like, go Ron. Like, yeah, that's awesome. Because it wasn't biologically his son. He had been, I mean, I couldn't get the exact dates. I mean, they'd been like a nice, tight little trio hanging out for, you know, being a family for many years. But I found that really sweet. So Katherine said that leaving her son and her husband was difficult, but she needed to answer for her past and to learn to live with, quote, openness and truth, which, yes, true. So, and this is according to Katherine, and I was able to, like, she writes about this in one of her books, and then I was able to actually substantiate this with an article from way back when. Thank God for the internet, like being able to digitize some of these older articles, because damn. So according to Katherine, she actually came up for parole after just 4.5 years. So remember, she was supposed to get 8 to 12. And after 4.5 years with good behavior and all that stuff, she came up for parole. And obviously, Officer Schroeder's family was upset about this. He still had a widow. He had 9 kids, if you remember. He also had some brothers, and they had all been told, hey, she's serving 8 to 12, a sentence that they weren't happy with in the first place, probably. I mean, literally, their loved one is gone. But they accepted it. They said, okay, that's the ruling. It is what it is. And during the parole hearing, one of Officer Schroeder's daughters, Clara, said that even though Katherine had said she was remorseful, Clara was like, I mean, that's part of trying to get parole is showing remorse. So, okay, like everyone knows that.
Right.
So at this point, Katherine explains that she actually withdrew her application for parole. She came to the conclusion that if her remorse wasn't attached to this request for parole, it would mean more, especially to Officer Schroeder's family. And an article I found from this, from that 4.5 years later, when she pulled back her parole, the daughter, Carol, actually said, okay, I think she did the right thing. Like, that's the right thing. She needs to serve her time. Another thing I read is that she did end up doing it again. So, like, 2 times she basically, like, turned down parole. In the end, though, she ended up serving 6 years at Framingham State Prison in Massachusetts. And she was released on October 2nd, 1999. So
Okay.
she reunited with her family and friends in Oregon. One thing that I thought was interesting, and I really, really love this kind of rule. We've seen it before. The judge on her case, he also added a 20-year probation period to her sentence that would put her in jail for life if she or any member of her family received any benefit or profit from telling her story. Which I love this because obviously a big part of her story would include the fact that she was part of a crime that resulted in the death of someone, and for that man's family to know that she would be making money off of his death, like, that's really shitty. And so I love when judges like add these kinds of things because I think it's so important. So he added that in 1993 when she was originally sentenced, and in 2013, though, that 20 years was up, and she published her first book. So I guess she ended up divorced.
So that what you're saying is only for the time, it's not after the fact?
Yeah, it was only the 20 years under probation. Once she was no longer under probation, she didn't have any kind of, that restriction.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
I mean, I heard you say that, but I guess it didn't process in my brain the way that it should have.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because you're kind of like, should you even ever be? I mean, for me, I'm kind of like, no, if writing is the way that is your therapeutic process, I mean, no one should ever take that away from you, but profiting off of it is kind of like, ew.
Yeah, you want to show the support. You write that book, and all the proceeds go to the family if they're willing to accept it. If they don't want to accept it, it goes to a different charity or a nonprofit or something. But the fact, because I can see the need to have that, how you said, like a therapeutic process of writing and getting it out there. There's also so many people that probably want to hear about that, and so like I could completely understand that, but the being able to have monetary gain after that is
not ideal. Not at all. Yeah. So, she did publish her first book back in 2013. I guess at some point she had actually divorced her husband. I didn't read anything crazy about it. I'm guessing it was pretty amicable, or as amicable as it could be, because I didn't read anything crazy about it. But I guess she was friends with a woman who kind of helped her pull together a lot of her like poems that she had written in prison and kind of just like her writings from prison. And she published that first book in 2013 called Doing Time: Papers from Framingham Prison. And then 10 years later, in 2023, she published a memoir entitled Surrender, My Journey from Gorilla to Grandmother.
Wow.
So today, Katherine Ann Powers is 76 years old. She lives in Boston. She actually ended up marrying the woman who helped her kind of pull all of those poems and stuff together after she got out of prison. And she is a grandmother. And she says that she sees her story as a cautionary lesson for those contemplating violent rebellions. She fully admits to being reckless, and she also says that she is still atoning for her actions. As she should be.
Yeah, as she should be. I feel like I have so many thoughts. Like,
let's hear them.
I want to sit. Let's hear them. I just want to sit and talk with her because you know how my brain just goes all over the place, but it's like, I wasn't there. Now I want to read certain things myself because I know that you could probably give so much more information on certain things that I don't know about. But so you go, there's 5 people, go to rob a bank. She's in the car. How long was she even away from it? How long was she gone? How long was she not even in that area when this happened? Because they hear about it later. They talk about it later. I understand the fact that you are there. You are a part of it. You are in the you are held accountable. I get that.
Right.
But at the same time, like, I do feel like, was there that thought for her that was like, I wasn't there. I didn't do that, which, like I said, I am fully in support of the fact that she was.
So, like,
you know what I mean?
So, like,
and so maybe she held on to that for so many years where it was like, no, like, maybe she really did have that belief of like, no, like, it wasn't me until it clicked that, okay, you didn't pull the trigger, but you're part of it, and this is still, you're accountable for your actions, and you're being there and being a part of this plan in the first place,
Totally.
And then her coming for, I don't know.
I
totally right now.
I totally see what you're doing. I'm sure that had to have been part of her thought process. I mean, that's only logical. Like, she was literally a mile away, and her and the 3 other people who actually were inside and robbed the bank, they didn't even know until later when they heard it on the radio that, like, someone, and he did not, the Officer Schroeder didn't die, like, immediately. Like, he was taken to a hospital. He ended up, dying later. So, like, when they find that out, and so I'm sure a lot of them, ultimately, that's the law. You are part of the crime. That's it. And I think that's part of the reason why, she only actually received a manslaughter charge. What I did find interesting was the fact that she received a manslaughter charge. Susan Edith Sachs, who actually helped rob the bank as well, she was in the bank that day, also received a manslaughter charge after evading police for like 5 years. And she also only received like less than a decade. I can't remember. I can't remember the exact, but not very long. But Robert, what was his name? The guy who turned on everybody. Hold on one second.
Yeah, the one that told everyone he got the 25 years.
Valeri.
Uh-huh.
So Valeri, he actually names all of his accomplices. Obviously, he didn't shoot anyone. He was in the bank, though. He got 25 years. That guy got 25 years. And so, it is kind of crazy to me that the 2 who evaded arrest got a lesser sentence.
That's what I was going to say when I was going to say, like, ultimately she was well aware that she was being looked for and that they were trying to find her.
Yeah.
And so
It's all, but I think you're right. I'm sure like that had to have been part of her thought process, was like, I wasn't even there. And she fully admits to being like naive, but it's like, yeah, you guys are running around with freaking guns, like, obviously. Like, So, but she admits to being naive, and I'm sure it happened when she was so young. And it is interesting that, it took 20 years, but she finally realized, like, oh, no wonder I've been in such a shitty mood for 20 years. I'm living a lie. Like, I've never fully accounted for my actions. And so she's basically, walking around for 2 decades with that guilt. Yeah, it's going to eat at you. And no matter how much you try to push it to the side, no matter how much you try to say, well, I was a mile away when it happened, I didn't know it was going to happen, that wasn't the plan for it to happen, you do eventually need to come to terms with the fact that you do need to take responsibility because you decided to be part of that. So, it is very interesting. I have not read either of her books. I'm not sure if I have like a moral, like kind of, I don't want to go there. But like, I mean, it would be interesting, I guess, to kind of understand her thought process, with that. But yeah, I think I have like a moral, like, about her profiting off of it. But yeah, so Katherine Ann Power, that's the story of one of only a handful of women who was on the FBI's Most Wanted. And the woman who still holds the record for longest listed. So
that is crazy. Crazy. Good job bringing that story. That is, there's so much to it. There's so many people, so many things involved. With her being the fifth one, I'm so glad that the officer and his family finally, it took too long. It took too long, but I'm so glad that finally they had the answers and the knowledge that people did have to pay for their actions and stuff. And so I'm thankful that came,
has it
came
at
around
least there's that
years
conclusion,
later.
right? That
Wow.
Yeah.
Woof. Now I want to look at that list and see who else is on it.
Oh, that's what I started looking at. FBI's Most Wanted, like women on the FBI's Most Wanted list. It is, wow. Like there's such a random like assortment. There are several from like, the 60s and 70s who are wanted for like, well, they're probably not still on the list, but they were there because of, protests and like this and that and then like both her and her roommate were on it, right? There's this other one. Oh, girl, I think I might have to do a series because there's this other one that is good about this one. You should do a series. Most Wanted. It's pretty insane. Yeah, maybe I'll do another one.
Well, and it's like, you don't want to be like, oh, this person looks like they belong on this list, or this person,
None of these women do, though.
Whatever.
You look at these women.
But that's what I was going to say. Her picture, she just looks like a young, innocent, like
college kid.
Just, yeah. Like I just want to sit and read a book and do nothing and bake. That's what she looks like.
Yeah, totally. She looked like the type of girl who would win the Betty Crocker Award.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, yeah, I mean, so many thoughts. But wow, thank you for that one. That is crazy, Heather. Shoot. And I love that it's not like a I'm glad kids are not involved.
I know.
In this one, we've had a lot of heavy, and we need to take a break from.
Sometimes we just need
crying,
an episode where we're not bawling would be, because we love, like, as much as we, obviously, you guys know, like, we're super passionate about those, and we can't help it when we cry, and we want to make sure those stories are out there. It is nice to. It was interesting doing this research because it was definitely something very different from what I usually am researching. Right.
Yeah. And that's definitely what I mean, because we're not going to stop doing those, but just need some of this for a little bit. All right. Wonderful. So that is that. If you guys want more of us, you can find us on the Supporters Club. That is through Spreaker. You won't find it on Spotify. You won't find it on Apple Podcasts. You have to go to Spreaker if you want to go there. That's where our doc talks are. We are finished up with Jean Monnet, or finishing up with Jean Monnet, and going to be diving into the next Doc Talk and other fun stuff. But it's also ad-free listening. So if you guys do not want to hear all of the ads that are in this, you can go there and listen without ads.
And y'all, it is
$4.44.
$4.44. That's what I was going to say. It's only $4.44. And if you don't want to get it, you know, just think about the fact that it's 444, and that, what is that angel number for? Like, is that one luck or something? Either way,
It's something.
Do it for good luck, and do it because it costs less than your Starbucks, your daily Starbucks, I guarantee you. Unless you're one of those people who literally get like a medium drip coffee, then it's about the same price.
That's $4.44 at this point, because I want to say that. So when I go to Starbucks, which is very, very rare, I get a venti ice shake and espresso, and I add oat milk because I don't want the regular milk.
So is that like a $10 drink?
It's like $8.69.
Yeah.
So I'm like, also, F that shit.
This is part of the reason I bought my Nespresso, because I fell in love with lattes, and I was like, I will be damned if I spend $5 every freaking day. Your girl's broke without the Starbucks helping that. So
I was trying to, sorry, I was muted, everybody. And I was typing, so my camera was going crazy. I wanted to see what the symbolism for 444,
what
the
is
angel
it?
number, is. In love and relationships, is a powerful number that carries a strong message. It's protection, stability, and balance.
So just go sign up for Spreaker for $4.44 because it's protective and it's balancing.
Yep.
That's
my dad's favorite number.
That was my number I wore in all my high school sports.
Yep.
I just
4, 4, 4.
realized that. 4.
You go, girl. You go, girl. All right. We will see you guys next Tuesday. Until then, stay safe. Be awesome. Trust your gut. Don't rob banks.
Especially. Don't live with lies
to whatever
for 20 years.
Confess to your deepest, darkest secrets.
Do it.
Immediately.
It obviously leads to, like, lifelong, like, change in your body in a positive way. So,
all right, do all those things. We will talk to you next Tuesday. Okay, love you. Bye.
okay, love you. Bye.
Okay, love you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.